My name is Nyan Thorne, and I hold the rank of Major General in the United States Army. But to my family, I've never been anything more than an inconvenience in uniform. They didn't see a daughter who served her country, or a sister who rose through the ranks in war zones half a world away. They just saw someone who refused to stay small and silent, someone who didn't play by the family's rules. I hadn't spoken to my mother or sister in almost a decade. Not since the funeral. Not since they let me stand in the back in full dress uniform while they posed for photos at my father's casket like it was a family brunch. I'd stopped trying after that. No phone calls, no visits, just the silence we all seemed to prefer. Then 2 weeks ago, a wedding invitation showed up on my desk at the Pentagon. A clean white envelope with my name printed in full. Nyan Thorne. No rank, no recognition, just the name they still used when they wanted me reduced. The return address was my mother's house in Virginia. And the event, my younger sister Emily's wedding. She was marrying a man named Gavin Rowe. That name alone made me freeze. Captain Gavin Rowe, a soldier I once pulled out of a collapsed safe house in Syria. I dragged him through burning rubble with shrapnel in my leg and smoke clawing at my lungs. I still have the scar. I stared at the envelope for a long time. My aide thought it was a joke. The others in my office didn't know what to say. But what got me wasn't the invitation. It was the handwritten note tucked inside, penned in my mother's immaculate script. Please behave. That was all it said. No greeting, no warmth. Just a warning like I was a threat to the pageantry. I didn't RSVP. I didn't call. I simply booked a red-eye flight and arranged for no one to pick me up. I didn't go to be celebrated. I didn't go to reconnect. I went for one reason, to be seen. Not in a dress, not with a smile painted on. I went as myself. As the daughter they disowned, the sister they mocked, the soldier they tried to erase. What I didn't expect was for the groom to salute me before the ceremony was over. And when he did, when he called me ma'am in front of 100 guests and introduced me by my true title, my sister's smile collapsed. That was the moment they stopped calling me a disgrace. That was the moment they remembered exactly who I was. The wedding invitation sat on my desk for 3 days before I touched it again. There was something surgical about how they had written my name, Nyan Thorne. No rank, no title, like a paper cut from the past. Not even a with love, or we hope you'll attend. Just that turnout from my mother. Please behave. That's what she always said when she didn't want me to speak. The office was quiet that evening. Most of the brass had already left for the night. I stood by the window of my quarters overlooking the PTOAC, dress uniform pressed and hanging like a memory in the corner. The hum of fluorescent light buzzed behind me. It was the kind of night where even the air felt expectant. That's when General Simmons knocked 2 sharp raps. Then he entered without waiting. He never waited. He was the closest thing I had to family in this line of work, and he'd seen me through enough campaigns to know when something was eating at me. He glanced at the envelope on my desk. Of course he already knew. You going? He asked, tone neutral. I haven't decided. He took a seat, resting one leg over the other, fingers steepled under his chin. Your sister? I nodded. The one marrying Rowe? Another nod. Simmons let out a soft whistle. He was the one you pulled from the rubble. Had half a beam pinning his leg. Hell of a rescue. I remember. My voice was flat. I still have the scar. There was a pause between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence military people understand where everything worth saying doesn't need to be spoken aloud. You really thinking of going? He asked again, more softly this time. I didn't look at him. I just said, I don't know what they expect. An apology, a smile, maybe just my quiet compliance. He leaned forward. Then don't give them any of it. Go because you choose to. Go because you earned the right to stand in the room and not flinch. I let that sit for a moment. Then I nodded once. That night, I booked a red-eye to DC under a civilian alias. I wore civilian clothes. I told no one, not my driver, not my aide, not even Simmons. When I left, the flight was half empty. I chose a window seat and paid extra to keep the other empty. The stewardess offered me champagne after noticing the insignia on my carry-on. I asked for water. Somewhere over the Midwest, I closed my eyes, not to sleep, but to steady myself. I wasn't going into combat, but family. That's a battlefield with no maps. The plane landed early before dawn. The terminal at Reagan was quiet, nearly antiseptic. I cleared security in minutes, my military ID slicing through bureaucratic layers like a blade. I didn't wait for baggage. Everything I needed was in one carry-on, and the uniform folded neatly inside. As I stepped outside, the morning hit me hard. Virginia in spring was always disarmingly beautiful. Blossoms on every street corner. Cardinals flitting between branches like nature's apology for everything else that hurt. I rented a car. No driver, no escort, just me and the road I used to bike down when I was 12 and still thought my mother's silence meant she was tired, not calculating. When I reached her house, I didn't knock right away. The shutters were painted recently. The lawn was trim. Everything in its place. A shrine to appearances. When the door opened, Barbara Thorne stood there in cream slacks and a stiff blouse that probably cost more than my entire duffel bag. Her hair was pulled into a perfect twist. She looked me over with all the warmth of a customs officer. "I see you got the invitation," she said. "I did. I hope you remembered to pack something appropriate. I brought my uniform." Her nostrils flared just slightly. "Please don't cause a scene, Nain. This is Emily's day." I looked her in the eye, voice even. Then maybe she shouldn't have invited the disgrace of the family. She didn't respond, just stepped aside and let me in. It was starting already. The house hadn't changed. Same lemon polish on every surface. Same chandelier in the foyer with a bulb out like it was daring anyone to mention imperfection. Even the silence felt rehearsed, like a soundstage waiting for cameras. Emily wasn't home when I arrived. Thank God for that. Barbara led me to the guest room with the casual coldness of a hotel concierge. "We're keeping it simple," she said as she opened the door. "Rehearsal dinner tomorrow. Ceremony the day after. We'll need you dressed and seated before the guests arrive." "No processional for the family?" I asked lightly. She paused. "You're not part of the wedding party." "Of course not." The room was immaculate. Beige carpet, white linens, a single hydrangea on the nightstand like a peace offering that hadn't been agreed upon. I placed my duffel on the floor, hung the uniform still in its garment bag, and didn't bother unpacking. I wouldn't be staying long. That evening, the rehearsal dinner took place at a private country club overlooking the PTOAC. It was the kind of place where smiles were manicured and every table had name cards printed in elegant cursive. Mine simply said Nth Thorne. No rank, no title, not even Ms., just the initial. It sat at the far end of the table near the server's entrance where the draft from the kitchen kept the air moving and the wine rarely reached. I pulled out the chair and sat quietly. The room buzzed with light conversation. My mother hovered like a stage director, adjusting napkins and wine glasses. Emily walked in 15 minutes late, dressed in ivory silk, glowing like she'd swallowed every spotlight in D.C. She barely looked in my direction before greeting our uncle with a squeal and a laugh that landed like a slap. They toasted her with sparkling rosé. To family, someone said to Emily and Gavin, said someone else. To new beginnings, Barbara added, her eyes flicking toward me, but never landing. No one mentioned me. No one said, "Welcome back, Nan." No one asked what I'd been doing for the last 9 years. The only acknowledgement came from a retired colonel seated 2 spots from Barbara. He squinted at me, tilting his head. "You look familiar," he murmured. Barbara leaned in quickly. "Nain's doing security consulting now overseas. Lots of travel." "Security?" he asked, eyebrows raised. Emily chimed in, grinning. "She guards important doors. We think?" The table chuckled. My eyes dropped to the salad fork. Polished. Symmetrical, harmless. I didn't say a word, but when the colonel looked back at me, his expression shifted. "Weren't you Afghanistan 2011 Operation Spearpoint?" I held his gaze. "Yes, sir." He opened his mouth to say more, but Barbara touched his arm. "So, about the dessert options." I looked down again and took a sip of water. It tasted clean and cold, even in that room where everything was staged. Something had cracked. They didn't say it yet, but they were beginning to remember. The morning of the ceremony arrived with too much sun. Emily had chosen a colonial-style church on the edge of Old Town Alexandria. It looked like it had been lifted from a postcard whitewashed brick, wrought iron gates, stained glass windows casting pastel light through the foyer. It was beautiful and curated everything in its place, except me. I arrived early as instructed. My mother's voice echoed in my head. "Be discreet. Blend in. No statements." I wore my full dress blues anyway. Not to provoke, but because I had earned every ribbon, every bar. I wasn't going to dim myself for anyone. The moment I stepped into the foyer, I found the seating chart. Names printed on thick pearlescent cardstock, Table numbers listed beneath like VIP codes. I scanned the chart once, then twice. No Nyan Thorn, no General Thorn, no anything. Then I saw it. Bottom right corner, scribbled in pen, like an afterthought. Table 12. Fire exit. I almost laughed. It was so on brand. I could have framed it. Barbara breezed past me moments later, a blur of beige chiffon and forced warmth. "You're at 12, she said, not breaking stride. "It's quieter for everyone's sake." I didn't reply. I walked into the sanctuary and took my place near the back. The pews filled slowly, all chatter and perfume and pearls. Bridesmaids fluttered. Cameramen snapped. Posed candids. Gavin stood at the altar, polished and unreadable. Our eyes met. For a moment, I thought I saw something flicker recognition. Maybe regret, but it passed too quickly to catch. Emily made her entrance with the theatrical grace of a woman who'd been practicing for this her entire life. The guests stood. The music swelled. Everything about her sparkled. And me? I remained seated. No one noticed. When the priest invited immediate family to come forward for a special blessing, I stood by reflex. But before I could move, Barbara's hand brushed my arm light. But firm. "This moment isn't about you," she whispered. Her voice was sweet, almost maternal. Almost. I looked at her, then at the altar, then at my sister, kneeling next to the man whose leg I had once stabilized with a field tourniquet and half a prayer. I sat back down. The blessing moved on without me. Later, in the reception hall, I found my table tucked behind a floral column near the catering door. My place card read "Nth Thorn" in tiny script. The napkin at my setting didn't match the others. The waiter skipped me when pouring wine. I requested a glass. He checked his list and shook his head. "Non-drinking guest." I didn't correct him. I just poured my own from the bottle left unattended at the next table. Across the room, Emily twirled and posed. Gavin stood at her side, always one hand resting lightly on her back. Neither of them looked at me, but I had a feeling that was about to change. The microphone caught the light like a weapon. Emily stood at the center of the ballroom, champagne flute in one hand, the mic in the other, glowing under the chandeliers like she was born to be worshipped. Her wedding dress shimmered with every movement. She didn't just smile, she commanded. "To love," she said sweetly, voice ringing with well-rehearsed charm. "To family, to loyalty," she paused, let the words linger, and to surprises. There was laughter, light and polite, until she turned toward my table. "Even my big sister made it," she said, lifting her glass all the way from wherever she's stationed now, still guarding those mysterious doors, I suppose. A few chuckles scattered across the room. Emily's smile widened. "Let's give a round of applause for the quiet sentinel in our lives." More laughter, warmer this time. Some uncomfortable glances. But no one stopped her. Then Barbara added her own line, voice crisp and cutting. "She may be the family shame, but at least she showed up on time." That broke something. The room tipped with amusement. I rose not fast, not flustered, just deliberately, like a tide that had been waiting. Conversations cut off mid-sentence, wine glasses still. Emily tilted her head. "Oh, come on, it's a joke. Lighten up, Nain. You always took everything so seriously." Before I could respond, Gavin moved. He stepped forward quietly, steadily through the sea of tables and startled guests. Every photographer turned, every breath held. He reached me and stopped one pace away. Then, with full precision, he saluted a crisp, formal military salute, not to a sibling, not to a guest, but to a commanding officer. "Ma'am," he said, voice clear, "please forgive my wife." He turned to face the room. "This is Major General Nain Thorn, former commanding officer. She didn't just serve, she saved my life." Gasps rippled, audible, tangible, like the whole ballroom forgot its own script. Emily's hand trembled. The microphone slipped from her fingers and struck the floor with a flat, echoing thud. She collapsed into a chair, face drained of color. Barbara stood, but no words came. Just a broken whisper of my name. And me? I didn't blink. They didn't speak, not because they didn't want to, but because any word now would confirm what they had done. I stood quietly, Gavin still beside me, his hand now lowered to his side. His spine remained straight. The weight of the moment didn't need amplification. It pressed into every guest, into the folded linens, into the champagne that no one dared sip. Then came the second shock. From table 2 near the orchestra, an older man rose. Colonel Rohr, retired. He had commanded the 87th Infantry the year I joined. He saluted. Then another, a woman in navy blue. Her salute was slower, but no less deliberate. And a third, a former West Point instructor. One by one, they stood for me. Barbara looked around, desperate to reel the night back under control. "This isn't the time," she hissed, trembling. But no one was listening to her anymore. For the first time in years, I was no longer the shadow at the edge of their story. I was the axis around which it now turned. Later that evening, my mother pulled me aside in the lobby of the hotel. Her pearls were gone. Her lipstick faded, but the mask remained. "You certainly made your point," she said, trying to smile. I didn't answer. She folded her hands. "There's media interest, some photos, questions about your role. If you could give a short statement just to clarify for the family's sake?" I stared at her. "You want me to protect the image you built by cutting me out?" Her smile cracked. "We just weren't prepared. We didn't understand what your career meant." "No, I said you understood. You just didn't care." She looked down. "It wasn't personal. That's the problem. It should have been." She went quiet, but I didn't wait for an apology that wouldn't come. I turned to leave. "You could at least help us clear it up," she called after me. I paused in the doorway. "Barbara," I said softly, "I spent half my life shrinking to make room for your comfort. That era ends tonight." And I walked away, leaving behind the table I was never meant to sit at. 2 weeks after the wedding, I stood behind a podium beneath the Pentagon seal. No dress blues, no decorations, just a tailored suit, and the truth I had carried in silence for far too long. "There are protocols for combat wounds," I said. "For grief, for trauma. But what do we offer those betrayed? Not by enemies, but by their own families." No one moved. I introduced the Sentinel Foundation National Resource for service members targeted by internal sabotage. Not from across a battlefield, but from within kitchens and phone calls and living rooms. From siblings, spouses, parents. "Sometimes the injury is trust," I told them, "and we need to stop pretending those wounds don't count." I didn't name Emily. I didn't have to. The headlines filled in the blanks for me. I didn't correct them. Instead, I stepped away from public life. I retired quietly, bought a small home on the coast of Maine, and started painting again. No medals on the wall, just a sea breeze, an old easel, and the version of myself no one ever tried to rewrite. One afternoon, a boy from the village came to deliver bread and asked, "Were you really a general?" I smiled. "Yes," I said. "But more importantly, I never stopped standing up for what mattered." He nodded and ran off before I could say more. Back inside, I sat at my desk and looked out over the Atlantic. The waves were constant, unbothered, free. My mother never apologized. My sister never reached out. But these days, when they say my name, they say it differently. They pause. They measure it. They say it with care. Not because they suddenly love me, but because now they know they can't erase me. And that is the quiet kind of justice I never needed to shout.